Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and today is October 24th, 2023, and I'd like to talk a little bit about a service that I'm going to be making available likely next school year, because I think it would be good for parents to have a heads up about what's coming, because I think it's going to radically improve Catholic homeschooling. When we look at modern schooling, we talk about public schools and private schools and homeschooling. Usually what happens is we look at what public schools are actually doing, and we compare that to what private schools are actually doing, and we compare that to what homeschools could do. We normally don't compare schools to homeschools in terms of actual achievement. We usually compare what schools actually do with the potential of homeschooling. But that potential is never realized. The potential of homeschool is not being realized. And this is one of the things that frustrates me, is I think that so much is possible in homeschooling, and we're not fulfilling the potential of homeschooling, because what most people are doing, what most publishers are doing, is they're simply offering school-type programs for people to use at home. Outside of those programs, there are a million different resources for homeschool families to use, but none of them integrate into any existing homeschool programs. And so it's all just this random, disconnected stuff floating around all over the place, and it doesn't actually help the students. And in the end, as I've talked about a number of times, homeschool students end up being penalized for homeschooling. They're penalized for homeschooling because records are poorly kept, time is poorly used, and so on. The potential of homeschooling is not fulfilled. The homeschool students pay the penalty for that. And ultimately, homeschooling continues to be this thing we talk about with all of its potential, but that potential is not realized. Now, I'm saying this as a homeschooling father. I look at my own children, I look at what they do, and I'm just not satisfied. It's nowhere near what's possible for us in Catholic homeschooling. And what I see being the limiting factor is that there's no system that's designed to actually allow students, allow parents to fulfill the potential of homeschooling. And, so I've been brainstorming, thinking about my own kids, being a frustrated homeschool parent myself, even though we've got all the resources of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy available to us, even though I've got 4 kids in college doing well. I'm just not satisfied. It's not what it can be. And if homeschooling isn't given the opportunity to be what it can be, to fulfill its potential, it's really not going to have the impact on education that it's capable of having. So I'd like to fix that. And I've been brainstorming recently with my own kids, like my second batch of high school kids in my own family, because I wasn't happy with what my first batch of high schoolers did. Again, even though they all went off to college and are doing well, I just knew we left so much on the table, and it was my fault because I didn't have a system in place that allowed the benefits of homeschooling to be realized. And I'm working to figure out how to fix that with my second batch of kids, and fix it so that it benefits all the students in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Now, a couple of the problems that I mentioned with homeschooling is that most families use a homeschool curriculum. They use Seton or Mother of Divine Grace or Classical Liberal Arts Academy. And yet there's so much more available in terms of resources that, people use this here and they dabble with this. They watch some great course videos. They have some content on YouTube. They use Khan Academy. They use IXL. They go on a family trip to Williamsburg or some historical place. Go to an art museum, whatever. There's so much that Catholic families can do. And yet, it's not organized for the benefit of the children in their homeschooling experience. It's just all of this random activity, and in the end, most of it just disappears. And that's one of the things that we have to fix. So there has to be a system developed that allows all of these different resources, all of these different activities to be accounted for, so that the kids, in all of the academic work that they do, all of the academic activities they participate in, get credit for it and have it included in their records. And there's no existing system that does that. And I see that as a need that needs to be developed. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the students are not put in control of their own education, which is what is really the essential point of a good education, is to teach and help students to take responsibility for their own studies, to cause them to desire to learn and to understand how to go about that learning. And most homeschool programs don't do that. They make the kids subject to their parents or to some program or to some tutor, and the kids sort of sit there until someone tells them what to do, and that's not education. So there has to be a system developed that puts the student in control of his own destiny, that puts him in control of his own learning, and motivates the student to do as much as possible, rather than to merely do what he's told to do. We've got to change the whole spirit of homeschooling and change it from being a teacher-directed program or a parent-directed program and make it a student-directed program. Because if it doesn't become a student-directed program, we've failed to achieve the most important objective in education, which is to raise children who take responsibility for their own learning. So that's another challenge. How can we build a system that puts control of studies in the student's hands and requires that the student take responsibility for his studies, and not just puts it in the student's hands and makes the student take responsibility, but motivates the student to do so? That's the challenge. How can we motivate students to take responsibility for their studies and give them the tools that they need to do that? That's a real challenge. So we've got some needs, some challenges, some problems in homeschooling that are preventing us from fulfilling the potential, from realizing the potential of homeschooling. And that's holding homeschooling back in general. But it's holding Catholic families back, holding our children back, and we need to fix this. Now, like I said, I've been working, thinking through this, developing some resources, working through them with my own kids, getting into the details of the use of them, finding what's good and bad, and continually improving it. And I'm pretty confident to say that I've got the system in place that needs to be established for us to accomplish these things, to finally break through and give homeschooling the opportunity to fulfill its potential. I'm planning on making this available in the academy next school year. So in 2024, 2025, I'm going to work with my own children using it this year and get them going with it so I can make some improvements. And if any troubles are had, they're experienced by my wife and I rather than other parents. But if things go well, I'm probably going to start to make this available to families after Christmas break in the winter term of 2024. Now, there's a couple of things that are necessary, and these things that I say are necessary. You have to realize I'm in communication week by week with hundreds and hundreds of families in different places with different needs in different circumstances. So not all of this may apply to your family. But I know that there are parents who regularly reach out and ask me for more help. They need more help. Practical help, daily help, help with keeping their children accountable, motivating their children, supporting their children. It's not a classical liberal arts academy thing. It's a parenting thing in general. It's homeschooling in general. They need more help. And I empathize with that because the burden that homeschool parents bear is very difficult. It's a very great burden. But the question is how to help. And the first thing that I'm going to propose may sound crazy, but I think it's really a solution. The first thing I'm going to propose is establishing, and I'm going to start this, and then I'm going to encourage my wife to do so as well, and possibly others. I'm going to establish a live study hall on Zoom where any students whose parents would like them to join me in that Zoom meeting will have basically a supervised study hall through Zoom throughout the day. And this will be available for hours and hours a day. It will not be scheduled in the sense that students need to be there at certain times, but it will be available for students whenever their parents desire it. The study hall will be a place where students can work on their studies privately. They'll be free to do what they do, but they'll do so with supervision, with access to a tutor who's present with them in the study hall, and this will be me as we get this started. It will allow the tutor to keep an eye on them, to check in on them, to ask them what they're working on, to make sure they're getting work done, to make sure they're using their time well, to make sure they're doing what their parents want them to do, and provide an extra source of supervision, accountability, motivation, and so on to homeschool students. It's really like a virtual study hall, which I think is something that many students have need of. They can't just sit there by themselves at a desk in front of a book or in front of a computer. They need some interaction. They need some accountability, similar to what's provided in a study hall in a school. That can be provided today through Zoom meetings. That's one thing that's necessary, and I'll explain why that's helpful a little more in a little bit. That's one thing that's necessary, is some supervised study time through what is essentially a virtual study hall that's just open all the time. I mean, I'm working in my office on academic tasks all day, every day. It requires nothing of me to flip a camera on, open up a Zoom meeting, and be present for students for virtual study hall. And I think it'd be very helpful for some important reasons. Secondly, there needs to be a system that students use to track all of their academic activities. It can't be random. It's got to be divided into their required subject areas, so English language arts, foreign language, mathematics, natural sciences, social studies, classical studies, Catholic studies, and so on. And they've got to have a place where they can go in and they can enter in daily activities that are completed, the amount of time they spent, if it's a graded task, what grade they received for the task, and so on. Keep track of all their activity. and have that activity verified by a parent or a tutor. So not just an activity list, but a verified activity list with grades that's kept for a subject area, for a school year, which becomes their record for that year of study. A record for that year where they record the work that they did during a given year, their grades, and so on. And that can easily be turned into a report card with grades. It can easily be turned into a transcript and so on for any grade level, from the earliest elementary grades all the way up through high school. There needs to be an activity tracking system that students can enter activities in, parents can enter activities in, tutors can enter activities in, for any activity related to a certain subject area. So for example, let's say one of the subject areas was theology. If a student spends 30 minutes completing the readings for a daily scripture reading course, he could enter that on his task sheet. Enter the date, how much time he spent, a description of the activity, under theology for daily scripture reading. And then if a parent oversaw that activity, the parent could initial it and verify that activity as being honest and accurate. Let's say he then gets up from his desk and takes a ride with mom and they go to Mass for an hour. Well, he can come home and add that as another activity under his theology subject. He can say, same date, 1 hour, attended daily Mass, and it can be verified by his mother. And then he could spend another hour, let's say, studying catechism and working on memory work. And he can take a quiz for that memory work, and he can enter 1 hour, studied catechism and completed quiz, and he can enter the score that he received on that assessment, and that can be verified by his parent as well. So a place where all of the activities, said daily prayers of family, said the rosary, went to Mass, studied catechism, read the scriptures, spent an hour reading a saint biography. Any activities that relate to the subject of theology can be recorded and verified on a record of activity for that subject. And the same thing can be done for any other subject. So for example, for mathematics, let's say the student is working on algebra in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So he's enrolled in the algebra course and he spends 30 minutes studying Lesson 12 of Algebra 1. He can write that on his task record and it can be verified by his parent. Then he goes on Khan Academy and spends 30 minutes or an hour on Khan Academy completing algebra activities. He can just add that task to his mathematics task record and have it verified by a parent. He then watches a 45-minute YouTube video on adding fractions in algebra, and he adds that activity under his mathematics task record and adds up the time and gets it verified, and just continues to add any activity that relates to that subject to that task record under that subject, and can do that all throughout the day, every day, year-round, just continually adding dated, timed activities under a relevant subject area. Now, the parent can verify all that if the parent's there with the child watching, making sure the kid's working, making sure that the record is accurate and so on. That can be verified by the homeschool parent, very simply. The parent would just need to initial a box next to the record. But the virtual study hall adds the benefit of allowing a tutor also to verify what the student was doing. So if the student is there in this virtual study hall in a Zoom meeting with a tutor, and the tutor knows what the student's working on, the student's working on it, the tutor can check in on the student, make sure he's still working on that activity. Then when the student enters that activity in his task record, the tutor can be the one who initials and verifies it rather than the parent. So now the student's got two sets of eyes supervising his work, able to verify his activities. And so he fills out this activity sheet, this task record, with verification. Grades can be given and so on. If the student attends one of my live classes, he can add that to his task record and have it verified because he was present and his attendance was known in the live class. So the key here, the key that I'm hoping to accomplish is to provide the students with a place where the students, this is really crucial, the students have to take the initiative. They have to take control of their education. They can enter every activity they perform, every task they perform, with the date and the time and the result, and have that verified by an adult, by a parent, by a tutor, and collect the record of all of the time they spend in a subject area, which can be totaled at the end of every quarter, at the end of every term, at the end of every school year. And then the grade of all of the activities that they've completed, all of those grades can just be averaged together and given as a grade for that period of time, that academic term. And all of this can be managed by the student himself or herself with the supervision and assistance of a number of different supervisors, whether they be parents or tutors. That's what I think the key need is for homeschooling to realize its potential. So all of these different resources that are available to our kids, whether it's a live class with me, whether it's an online lesson, whether it's an online quiz or a written assignment or a family trip somewhere, evening family rosary time, Bible reading, watching a YouTube video, completing Khan Academy lessons, completing IXL activities, other curriculum programs, other books, other topics, anything that a student does under a given subject area can be recorded for that student, and he obtain credit for it, which is what he deserves. This is what will prevent homeschool students from doing all kinds of stuff and not having credit given for it. It will prevent homeschool students from being penalized for homeschooling. And it will motivate the students to know that the more that they do, anything that they do, the more that they do, the more they can add, and they can just watch their totals add up and build up, and their records get more and more impressive the more they do. It puts control of the student's learning in the student's hands and it gives the student the opportunity to fulfill what I call the work first principle in education, which is the students have to take the initiative and do the work first and then receive rewards for the work that they do. Rather than this modern education where the kids sit idle and passive and the adults perform and the kids are given credit for things that they didn't actually do. That's where minimum standards education comes from, because the student knows the less they do, it makes no difference, because they just blame the teachers, they blame the school, they blame their parents, because the adults in their lives have set up this passive educational program, which is the opposite of everything that education should be. And this is what will allow, this system I'm describing, this is what will allow the potential of homeschooling to be realized. Now, as I said, I've been working on this already because my kids use a number of different resources. They pull stuff from all over the place for their studies, not just the CLAA, but they study lectures in the Great Course series. They do they'll do some IXL stuff, Khan Academy stuff, study other books, other resources. Go to faith formation classes at church. They should get theology credit for that in their homeschooling. So my kids have a lot of different resources and activities they do, and I'm working to get this started for them so I can work out all the kinks and see all the different scenarios that need to be provided for. It also allows for other subjects like electives and physical education, things like that. So, as I said, as a frustrated homeschool father that really gets irked by what's done in the name of homeschooling, I want to fix and solve this problem because I want homeschooling's potential to be realized, and I want these kids to get the motivation that they need, the support that they need, the rewards that they deserve, and so on. And I know what's needed. It's just a matter of working out the practical details of it, which I'm already working on. And as I continue to do that, I'd like to start sharing it with other families and sort of ease students into it, because the benefits will be immediate. And I think it's going to be radical. I think it's going to take pressure off homeschooling parents. I think it's going to motivate homeschooling students. And the problems, like I said, parents who contact me asking for more help, sending SOS signals to me, begging for more help for their children, I think I know what they need, and I think I've got a plan that's going to provide for it. And if you're interested in getting started with it, it's only going to be available to students who are enrolled in the Academy's premium student plan. I mean, this is an intensive service, but anyone who's enrolled in the Academy student premium student plan, which costs $100 per month per student, anyone who's enrolled in the premium student plan will be welcome to get started with this and use it. It will probably replace the planner service, because compared to this, the planner service is going to be ridiculous. This is going to be so much better, so much more effective. But it will be open to any student enrolled in the premium student plan, and I'll make more announcements about it as I get ready, but I'll be ready to get started with students using this system, and I'd be ready to get started probably after Christmas break, just to allow for a fresh start for the winter term. And if you're interested as a parent or as a student, just let me know, and I'll start to share more of the information with you. We'll get the kids' resources set up for them so they can start using them. And honestly, as an educator, but more importantly as a homeschool parent, I think that what we set up for these kids and get going is really going to blow you away. I think that parents are going to realize that this is what they've needed all along, and this is what will allow homeschooling to actually fulfill the potential that we all feel homeschooling has, but don't ever seem to realize. I think we're going to realize it. So keep an eye out for announcements. If you're interested, if the things I've talked about are of interest to you, let me know. Send me an email and let me know. And for those of you who have contacted me and asked for more help for your children, this is my response to those requests for help. This is going to be what does it. And I'm going to make myself available for these live study halls, and then if I have live classes, the kids can just join me in those classes, add all of that activity to their task records, and I think you're going to find help that you need. I think the kids are going to find help that they need, and I think we're going to accomplish some really amazing things once we get these practical tools in place to allow homeschooling to fulfill its potential. So keep an eye out for announcements. Let me know if you're interested, and we'll get rolling with this sometime soon. God bless.